How is it possible for a country with literally no natural resources, not even enough water for its own people, to become one of the wealthiest nations on the entire planet? It sounds impossible, right? Well, it happened. And today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of Singapore.
So let's set the scene. The year is 1965. The nation's leader, Lee Kuan Yew, is on television, and he is visibly emotional, actually breaking down. He's announcing to the world that his country has just been separated from its bigger neighbor, Malaysia. This wasn't a moment of triumph. For him and for his country, it was a moment of pure anguish and terrifying uncertainty.
And here's the thing you absolutely have to understand. Singapore didn't choose to leave. This wasn't some grand declaration of independence. They were expelled, kicked out, pushed into existence. All of a sudden, this tiny island was completely on its own, a nation not by choice, but by force.
And the situation they found themselves in, well, it looked completely and utterly impossible. Singapore was this tiny new country, basically adrift in a sea of challenges, with no obvious path to survival.
I mean, just look at this checklist of problems. They were surrounded by much larger nations that weren't exactly friendly. They had zero natural resources. We're talking no oil, no minerals, nothing. They didn't even have enough fresh water for their own population. And to top it all off, they had no army to defend themselves. By any logical measure, this was a recipe for a failed state.
So, when you're facing problems this huge, where do you even begin? Well, Singapore focused on the two things that could wipe them out immediately: water and defense. And their solutions were, frankly, nothing short of genius.
First up, the water problem. Okay, so if you don't have rivers, you have to get really, really creative. Singapore's plan was unbelievably audacious. They decided to turn the entire country into a giant rain catchment system. Think about that. Every single roof was designed to collect rainwater. Every building effectively became part of a massive citywide reservoir. The goal was simple, and it was totally non-negotiable: achieve water independence, no matter what.
Okay, so that's water. What about defense? How does a tiny little nation protect itself from being swallowed up by much larger powers? Well, they came up with a fascinating and brilliantly named idea: the poisonous shrimp strategy.
It sounds a little funny, right? But the thinking behind it is deadly serious. The idea is, yeah, you might be small, like a shrimp, but you can make yourself so toxic, so poisonous, that any big fish that tries to eat you will get so sick it'll wish it hadn't. In practical terms, this meant building a small but incredibly advanced military that could inflict massive damage. You make the cost of attacking you so painfully high that nobody in their right mind would even think about trying it.
So with the basics of survival, water, and defense being sorted, Singapore still had to build an entire economy from scratch. Now, at the time, most new countries were looking inward, protecting their own industries. But Singapore? They made a completely different and incredibly risky bet.
You have to realize how radical this was. While other newly independent nations were nationalizing their industries and throwing up huge tariffs on imports, Singapore did the exact opposite. They threw open the doors and rolled out the red carpet for foreign companies. They slashed taxes and embraced free trade. And while everyone else was suspicious of foreign money, Singapore went out and actively courted it, knowing it was the only fuel they had for growth. They zigged while literally everyone else zagged.
But you know what? None of that would have worked. The foreign investment, the free trade, any of it, without one single foundational principle: trust. To get the world's biggest companies to come, Singapore built a system with an absolute zero-tolerance policy for corruption. This became the bedrock of their entire economic model. It sent a clear message: your money is safe here. This is a stable, predictable place to do business.
So, the big question: did this wild, audacious, counterintuitive plan actually work? Oh yeah. The results were so fast, so dramatic, that the world started calling it the Singaporean miracle. They went from the third world to the first world in a single generation. The speed of this transformation is just staggering. I mean, in 1965, this was a poor port city. By the 1980s, it was an industrial powerhouse with rapidly rising living standards. Then by the 2000s, it had reinvented itself again, becoming a global hub for finance and high tech. And that brings us to today, where it consistently ranks as one of the richest and most advanced countries on Earth.
In fact, no matter what metric you look at, GDP per capita, how easy it is to do business, overall quality of life, you'll very often find Singapore right here, at number one. It's just an astonishing achievement for a tiny island that started with absolutely nothing. So when you look at the whole story, it's just this incredible tale of ingenuity, discipline, and sheer long-term thinking against what seemed like impossible odds. It really leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? What is the biggest lesson we can take from Singapore's impossible rise? Maybe it's that with the right strategy, any disadvantage, no matter how great, can be turned into a strength. Something to think about.